Right now, we're going to focus on some individual players from the Irish squad. I've asked the lads to select two each. So starting with yourself, Tom, I think you want to harp on Paddy McCarthy.
Yeah, I think this was an easy enough pick straight away. Paddy McCarthy, for people would have seen him in playing both sides of the scrum in throughout the World Cup, both on tight head and loose head. He's the younger brother of Joe McCarthy, they're both out of Blackrock. But really excited about Paddy, and for me, looking at him as a sort of a amateur coach, Loosehead is the place where Leinster need to focus on him. He's absolute monster. The way Leinster play, you look at Andrew Porter, that very mobile, good ball handling skills. He's like the next generation of an Andrew Porter type player. Yeah, absolutely outstanding in the World Cup. Very aggressive, good ball handling skills, and yeah, it won't be long before maybe we see himself and his brother tug out in blue for Leinster. Yeah, really excited about him, and we've Jack Boyle in the same position in the academy as well, a year ahead of him. So from that point of view, it looks really good for Leinster, and hopefully for Ireland. Then, if these lads continue on that sort of trajectory, but yeah, no, you could see it some underage before that. I'd seen him a couple of times at Leinster under 18s, and he really stood out as a physical specimen. And the Irish scrum was very good. We touched on the World Cup final against France. It wasn't because of the scrum we lost against a more physical. Look at that size of that second row France had, and they had some really big guys in the front row with a lot of top 14 miles in them. And Paddy McCarthy, in the set piece, didn't look out of place. But it's what he does around the pitch. Really is it's that type of player Leinster have been sort of nurturing for the last sort of 10 years, and maybe 5-10 years, about all sort of a player that has more facets to their game than just sort of traditional loose head. But yeah, exciting times to see Paddy. He's definitely one that will be around Leinster for a long time, and easy could say now and play this clip back in 5 or 10 years time, but he's a sort of 100 cap player for Leinster, and the rest could be that good of a player. So yeah, but as long as they set on one position, and I think Loosehead, market might be low a little bit more as well about the propping positions, but for me he's an out and out Loosehead.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd agree with Tom on that. I think he was an average tight head in the scrum in the Six Nations and at the start of this tournament, but again his play around the park never really suffered, even though he was under pressure in the scrum in the Six Nations. But he stepped it up once he's gone to Loosehead. He seems to be more suited to Loosehead to me, and his aggressiveness at scrum time was impressive. His ruck work is exemplary as well.
Is this versatility something that coaches are looking for now? I mean, or is it just are they just using players to suit the situations they're in? I mean, are the props are becoming they played around with Andrew Porter a bit when he came up, but then he settled on one side. But now they're the last couple of years, this last World Cup cycle, they're starting to move Cian Healy and all this stuff, and now we've seen under 20s teams doing this as well. Is this the future now for props coming through the system, or do you think they keep it more specialized?
I'll let Tom finish on it, but for me, at that level, you've got 8 subs, so you don't have to be that versatile as a prop. Find your best side and go with it. It does help in those once a season, once every couple of seasons situations where if 2 tight heads go down, he could do it in an emergency. That sort of scenario. But let him develop as a loose head going forward. Leinster have an amazing starting front row, and they've got a really good, like Michael Milne is a very good loose head prop as well. But Paddy probably has a higher ceiling, if you want to put it that way. But let him develop. He's still young. He doesn't look like a prop. He looks like a 6 to me. He who can prop. He will fill out that frame. You look at Porter and you go prop straight away. Healy, prop. Paddy McCarthy's 6'3", probably. Big old tall lad. So,
I think, Mark, you read my mind. I was just about to say that Leinster for the last 5 to 10 years, when they search across the province from the northeast to Dundalk all the way down to Enniscorthy, they look for a lot of 6 and 8s, the guys that can play good handling skills, good balls, and they turn them into props. And that's replicated with a lot of players. So I wouldn't have known what position Paddy McCarthy played when he was younger, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a bit of back row play there for a while, because that seems to be the way, you know, if you talk to any of the Leinster coaches that coach at that level, you know, they spot guys that are playing in the back row or 6 or 8 especially, and they go, right.
Well, there's just so many athletes. I mean, proper athletes coming through the system that they can't all play back row. But
when I worked for the IRFU, we had the same remit. You know, we had to look at 6 and 8s that, you know, might have been undersized height wise, never going to be. You know, we used to turn a lot of ball carrying 8s who would have been around the 6'2", 6'3" mark, or maybe just over 6 foot, and just like, listen, you're not going to go any further in the game. It's not trying to the detriment of the kid. Like, if you want to progress into the game, your future is probably a proper hooker. It's the same with a lot of 7s. A lot of 7s who would have been undersized height wise, it wouldn't be line out options. You would be asked by provinces and by the IRFU development board to look at guys potentially for front row, because we don't breed front. We don't breed them as such. You know, and a lot of the guys we sent over to provinces would have had an experience, as Tom said, from maybe 15, 16, 17, under 17s and that at 6 or 8, and eventually when they get to national consideration, you're looking at converted props, converted hookers.
Okay, so we're gonna move along now, and there was we've talked a lot about Sam Prendergast in a lot of these pods. I'm sure he played a game for Leinster there, a couple of games for Leinster last season. So we've spoken a lot about him, but a lot of what he's done for the under-20s is down to his scrum half as well. Fintan Gunn has been his partner in a lot of these big Irish performances. And Mark, you wanted to talk about him for a bit.
He's impressed me in every single game. I've not seen him have a bad game yet. I've not seen him have an average game yet. As a coach, he's everything you want out of a 9. He runs and runs and runs and runs, and he's very rarely not at a breakdown. I don't want to put too much hyperbole on the kid, but he's got the most complete all-round game of a 9 I've seen at that level for a very, very long time. You know, Craig Casey had a very good under-20s career, but I think, and this is not a Leinster bias thing or anything like that, I think Fintan Gunn is suited to how Leinster and Ireland want to play more than any other scrum half. He can kick off both feet. His passing off both hands is long and accurate. He's a very good support player. He doesn't break all the time, but he can do. You know, he literally is. And I know we all were talking, and everybody was talking about Sam Prendergast, but part of the reason Sam Prendergast is made look good is the 9 gives him so much time. The passing and the accuracy and the continued excellence of Fintan Gunn. You know, he's a smart player as well. The tap penalty and going the final, and run at an absolute monster of a player in the process. Yeah, people look at that and go, "What's he doing?" But like, that's the ultimate mismatch. Yeah. I say that to the guys that I coach. I say it to my wingers. I said, I want to run at you because that's a mismatch, but you want to run at me because that's a mismatch. You know, he's a very smart player. And to have that rugby IQ at that age is great, and it'll only get better. He's probably a mix between Luke McGrath and JGP, you know, in terms of how he plays the game. He probably has a better passing game than JGP, and he's probably got a better breaking game than Luke McGrath does. So I think that the ceiling for Fintan Gunn is a very, very, very high one, and I would love to see him involved pretty quickly into the URC reckoning come next season.
Definitely, I think him with Foley obviously, Cormac Foley as well. I think that looks decent enough for Leinster. Let's get Leinster centric for a minute. That looks pretty good for the future.
You know, Absolutely. even Richie Murphy's young fella.
Yeah, Ben.
Is not a million miles off the mix either. You know, so scrum half is a position of serious depth for Leinster, and we were asking why people were letting Paddy Patterson go. There's a reason why Paddy was allowed to go to Munster, is because of the quality that is the potential that is there for guys underneath him.
Yep, it'd be very interesting to see those squads for those early URC games. All right. Okay, so we're going to move along now and go back to yourself, Tom. You wanted to talk a bit about the fullback, Henry McArleen.
Yeah, this is a guy that, you know, sort of quietly, I won't say quietly came on the Six Nations, but, you know, he wasn't, inverted commas, one of the ones to watch, for want of a better word. He did, you know, and he's comes, in his own personal life, he's come a slightly circumnavigated route. He's from the heartlands of Antrim originally, where hurling is a strong, you know, he played hurling as a young fella, you know, where the McNaughtons who used to play for Antrim back in the day, and his parents ended up moving south, and he ended up going to St. Michael's in Dublin, and you know, played rugby there. But so he's got northern roots. Hopefully that doesn't mean our northern brothers will try and poach him, because this guy is a classy player. You know, he hasn't got size in his size yet, but there's, you know, Mark spoke about Fintan Gunn in the mix. There's a little bit of Hugo Keenan's and a cross between Gervin Dempsey in front. Just he's been so secure under the high ball. You know, we used to take Gervin Dempsey for granted, but he's great positional awareness, something that we all take for granted with Hugo Keenan. Just that ability to read where the ball is going to go and get there, and it looks like he's always in the right place at the right time. He's a far better line breaker and John hitting that line than Gervin. That wasn't Gervin's strong point. Maybe more Jordan Murphy's, trying to sort of get parts of different players to try and explain the strengths of Henry McArleen. But yeah, I'm very excited about him. He hasn't got size on his side yet, and with modern rugby, kicking has become a huge part of it. And it'll be interesting to see how Leinster develop him in that. I don't think he's a winger. He hasn't got that size and explosiveness yet, but he's a very, very clever player. You know, he's done playing a bit with it in AIL with Terranure, and I know the rugby guys in St. Michael's say he's one of the best players to come out of Michael's in the last 5 or 10 years. So if you think of the company that's in, your Dan Levy's, your James Ryans, your Ross Burns, Scott Penny's, etc., Ross Maloney's, to say they're one of the best past pupils rugby wise, that should tell us all that this guy's got a pretty high ceiling, and he strikes me as a very intelligent player as well. I was very impressed with him throughout the World Cup, and he was targeted a bit as well. Maybe they thought he was his size, but he always stood up to it. He just has really clever awareness of where to be at the right time and spot where he might have a little bit of help when they're high ball. You know, sharp. You know, people going to the right areas where he can be shepherded to catch safely, and then he's a good strike runner. Joins the line pretty well. His nice pass, and so he's got the core bits there, and it'll be interesting to see how he develops. He's the sort of player. I don't know what his ceiling is, but I'm not going to sit here and say this guy could be a 100-cap player for Ireland. We don't know, but he's definitely the type of player that will be massively important to Leinster. Just a really good squad player that will play 90% of the games throughout the season when the internationals are away. Maybe that's the early part of his career is going to be that when he gets to his early 20s, mid 20s, and then if he develops on from there, that's a huge bonus. But yeah, really impressed with Henry McArleen. Really classy player.
Yep, indeed. And we've harped on 3 Leinster players so far. So I suppose we better look outside the province for our final one. Mark, you're going to have a look at Brian Gleeson.
Yeah, it was very close between John Devine and Brian Gleeson, who I'd like to have had a chat about. Tom spoke about Devine earlier on, and yeah, he's a cracking player for Connacht. But Gleeson is a player who, again, we talk about ceilings and excitement, and every other country was talking about Gleeson, and rightly so. His ball carrying, there's, if we're going to do the NFL sort of adage of comparing him to different players, he's the closest thing I've seen to Stephen Ferris in a very long time in terms of how he carries the ball. It's just out and out pure aggression, and loves a bit of contact. Not the most subtle of players at the moment, so it'll be interesting to see how he develops at Munster. He has got good hands. He has got a good offloading game. But by God, that try against South Africa in the semi-final, like as we said, it was the South Africans may as well have had Matador outfits on them because they just guided them to the line there.
One of them actually did get out of the way.
Yeah. The 13, like we were talking about the 10 because the 10 was actually in the way, but the funny guy for me was the 13, who was about 3 yards away, could have come in and helped out, and tried to slow him down. And he literally just turned his head and just went, yeah, I'm having none of that.
Nope.
I don't want any of that. So no more than Leinster trying to balance, you know, Caelan Doris and Jack Conan, and that Munster are going to have a conundrum on their hands with Gavin Coombs and Gleeson. The big loser out of this, if it was me making the call, should be Jack O'Donoghue, but it'll be interesting to see how Munster develop him. You know, Coombs is I'm a huge Gavin Coombs fan. He's almost like a modern version of Dean Richards, and I don't mean that in any disrespect, in that he doesn't look the most athletic, but he's always in the right place at the right time, and he makes really good decisions, and he's a big old bugger, hard to stop near the line. You know, Gleeson, if I was to use somebody like Gleeson, I'd play him at 6 at the moment, and I'd have him out in slightly wider channels and let Coombs do more of the heavy carrying. It depends on how you want to develop him, but developing him, what he needs to work on potentially is his line out work. But as a pure athlete at 19 years of age, it's very rare we produce animals like that. And he's somebody who I know World Rugby will keep an eye on, but if we nurture him correctly, in both the Irish and Munster system, and I think they will. I think Munster have done really well developing a lot of those players coming through, Ruan Quinn and himself. I think Gleeson's 8'6", you know, there's as I said before, there's a touch of the Stephen Ferris about him, about how he carries the ball in hand. He's got the speed of Ferris. He's got the aggressiveness. He will fill out. Like, it's scary. I replied to one tweet going, people are going, how good is he? I said, imagine when he actually puts a bit of bulk on and gets 2 or 3 years in the gym behind him. You know, he's a good tackler. He's aggressive. His natural athleticism is just something that we don't see too often in these islands.
Absolutely. Well, listen, lads, that's brilliant. That's just four. We could have done another half a dozen at least players out of that squad. There's lots of talent in there from all 4 provinces. So it is really good to see, despite how that final went.